But he's like, the second they find out I lost that document, I'm dead. They didn't exactly get asked their opinion. This dude did not finish high school, fam. He had no qualifications. He's like, come back to the home country. Things are awesome. We'll give you all the things and it'll be great. And as I'm sure you can guess, it all came true. Today is the day where I show you my North Korean book collection. While I don't plan on keeping all of them, because I realized I was just being pretentious by having a lot of these books in my collection, because I'm probably not going to reread them, but there's so many good books in this collection, I thought I would pay homage to them in a video. And then if you are curious, in books about North Korea, you will have a whole list that you can choose from. Let's get started. I have them in roughly 4 categories, and these are not all the books of North Korea I've read. This is just a sampling from what I actually own, because I don't want to be here all day. If you're curious how I got into reading so much about North Korea, it's purely by accident. I used to work in a bookstore and I wanted to be more well-rounded in my reading, so I'm like, I'll read a book from every aisle. So in the history aisle, I'm like, what's something I haven't read or learned a lot about? North Korea. And then I read one, I'm like, whoa. And that's just the start of the rabbit hole. First is Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Lives in North Korea by Barbara Demick. And she is a journalist I really like. This is one of 2 books I've read from her so far. I really truly love the depiction she gives of the North Korean people, and really letting people know that they're not these alien creatures. They're humans just like us. They're just dealing with an insane foreign situation. As you can see, it is perfectly manageable. I think this is a really good book to pick up if you don't know much about North Korea and you don't want to commit to like a really thick book on it. And she covers just some of the everyday people in North Korea. It's a touch dated now because I think it was copyrighted in 2011? No, 2009, 2010. But I think it still holds up really well. Just keep in mind, it's a snapshot in history that things have changed. There's a different ruler with Kim Jong-un, and so, but it is a more modern look than you'll get from some other books. Then we have The Great Successor, The Divinely Perfect Destiny of Brilliant Comrade Kim Jong-un by Anna Fifield. This is like the most modern book on North Korea that I've read, I believe, to date. This one came out relatively recently in 2019. As the title suggests, it focuses on the current ruler Kim Jong-un, and it does give you some background history and things like that, but it is nice to get a book that is more focused on modern day, because a lot of our intelligence, and thus a lot of our books, have really dated information, or they take place in the time period of Kim Jong-sung or Kim Jong-il. That's cool from a historical perspective, but it doesn't tell you much of the modern landscape of North Korea. This wasn't my favorite North Korean book, but if you're wanting a really modern take, this could be a good read. Next, we got The Impossible State, North Korea Past and Future by Victor Cha, with a new chapter on the historic meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. So super important with this one that you make sure you get the newer edition with that new chapter. This one's an interesting read because the author actually worked in the White House he was the Director of Asian Affairs at the National Security Council from 2004 to 2007. So he's got such an interesting insight and opinions that you're not going to see in just any book. And again, also the slightly more modern take focuses a lot more on the political aspect and the complications of dealing with North Korea from the standpoint of American government. So 2018 is the latest copyright, but I think that's probably for that chapter there. The rest of it probably came out around 2012 or so. But it was really fascinating, especially towards the end. He gives a breakdown of just the different options a lot of people throw out that we could do regarding North Korea, and the real domino effect each of those could end up having. I think that's just really interesting to get in the mind of. He's like, yeah, it's simple to say X, but really when you're committing to X, you're committing to the consequences of Y and Z. And I thought that was really interesting. See You Again in Pyongyang, A Journey into Kim Jong-un's North Korea by Travis Jepson. I should say that the second category of books that I'm talking about are more memoir biography bent. I think it's also interesting because they're not the more common ones that you'll hear about from like famous North Korean defectors. And that's not good or bad. I'm not saying those books are bad. I just didn't feel the need to own them. I've read most of them. And this one is really cool because you have this guy who's a novelist, poet, and critic who writes his memoir. He was like the first American to study at a university in North Korea, and he kind of has a very contrary opinion to a lot of people who talk about North Korea. Not really for me to decide if I think it's good or bad or accurate, but it is a very interesting take. And as you can maybe see from these few books, you have such a rich reading repertoire when it comes to North Korea because these people are going to see such fundamentally different things, right? You have a guy who's working in American politics. You have a guy who was like studying at a North Korean university. Hello. So he's going to see stuff that politics dude's never going to see and vice versa. And I think that's really interesting. This is a wild one. This is King of Spies, The Dark Reign of America's Spy Master in Korea by Blaine Harden. He is such a good writer. He's actually written several books and several regarding North Korea. This is just bananas. This is a biography of Master Sergeant Donald Nichols, who white man confidenced his way into becoming this like major spy keeper, master, linchpin in Korea. He was just in South Korea in the right place at the right time. He befriended the South Korean dictator that we implanted. And they got so close that they jokingly referred to each other as father and son. This dude did not finish high school, fam. He had no qualifications. It's kind of scary, the stuff he was able to do and achieve and get away with, and it's a wild ride. But again, it's a very interesting snapshot. It's a particular man, but in the context of Korea, the war, and just, it's insane. This is a really cool read, even if you're not a big fan into history or North Korea. Dear Leader, Poet, Spy, Escapee, A Look Inside North Korea by Jang Jung-sung. So this is a memoir from a North Korean defector, and this one's really fascinating. I don't hear as many people talking about it, probably because he doesn't, you know, really do interviews and all that stuff from what I've seen. But what's really cool is he was really a high-ranking intelligence agent and former poet laureate. So, you know, he was higher class, higher status. He worked in Pyongyang. He had access to so many materials that others didn't. He like wrote to prop up the leader, Kim Jong-il, at the time. And so it's really fascinating because, again, amongst the defectors, you have people that were in different regions of North Korea who escaped at different times, that were in different class structures. So he had what was considered an ideal life in North Korea. And it's actually a really silly mistake. He has a slip up with losing really important documents that screws him over. It's like he didn't like plan on leaving, but he's like, the second they find out I lost that document, I'm dead. And so then he has to plan his escape. And so it's a really interesting story and a really interesting perspective. Then we have The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot, the true story of the tyrant who created North Korea and the young lieutenant who stole his way to freedom by, guess who? Blaine Harden, my boy. He finds the most interesting angles into this conflict and to this topic. Again, so interesting. You're not going to get this necessarily in any other book. And it's really cool. It's about this guy who becomes, like the title suggests, he becomes a fighter pilot for North Korea. It specifically talks about like how they were trained, where they were stationed, some of the relationship between them and like China and the Soviet Union during that time, as well as some like American propaganda and things like that were going on that was just completely silly. And he actually flew his plane to freedom, which made him doubly awesome in the eyes of America because they had wanted to tinker around and understand the Soviet aircrafts that were far superior than ours at the time. It's so good. Like even the other like history books I've read don't really mention these nuggets. So it's kind of cool to get if you're already interested in the history of North Korea or you have a good foundation to dive into one of these books and get an interesting glimpse at something you might not be familiar with. Then I have a little pile for like history or an overview of certain things. So this one's called The Invitation Only Zone, The Extraordinary Story of North Korea's Abduction Project by Robert S. Boynton. And this covers specifically the topic of North Korean abductions, but particularly with their propaganda towards Koreans living in Japan, because unfortunately with the Japanese invasions of World War II, they took over Korea and took a lot of Koreans over to Japan for cheap labor. These people ended up staying there because they didn't have much of a choice. They didn't exactly get asked their opinion, and we're kind of racist. So when Americans were occupying Japan, we were like, yo, are you even Japanese? Were you fighting for the Japanese or were you coerced? Like, there was no conversation there. But the Japanese looked down on Koreans, so there was a lot of racism happening for the Koreans that were in Japan. And North Korea at the time was giving a lot of propaganda, being like, come back to the home country, things are awesome, we'll give you all the things and it'll be great. And as I'm sure you can guess, it all came true. No, it didn't. So some people came with their own free will, some people were taken by North Koreans, and them figuring out the reality of North Korea when it's too late, that, hey, all the North Koreans don't like you because they think you're traitors. So no one trusts you, you're gonna get all the shitty jobs, and also that what you were told North Korea was isn't exactly the truth. Sorry. Very interesting history, and it kind of widens the scope again to look at this bigger phenomenon that's happening both within the Koreas and globally. Korea, Where the American Century Began by Michael Penbrook. This is such a well-written book. It is a really good, detailed history without getting insanely lengthy. I think it's a perfect primer if you really like, I don't know, I just vaguely know these places and events exist and that's about it. I recommend picking this guy up. It's really well paced, it's clear, and it doesn't bog you down in minutia. Like it keeps, it's very readable, it's very accessible, I think, even if you haven't like done anything with what you learned in school or the occasional news headline. It is just bananas what American personnel did or did not do during this time, just how egotistic and just stupid they were, that they were just so wrapped up in their own personal drama and biases and opinions. They were just all up their own asses. They didn't see the Korean War coming. They didn't realize how they made things worse. They didn't stop when the going was good, and just fucked over not just a nation but an entire region, just the future of the world and global economics in one fell swoop. So must read, especially for people who have like this really like picturesque version of American history. Read this, read the truth. Like, it's just, it can be hard to read. It can also be sadly hilarious, like dark comedy, because it's just wild some of the calls we made during this time period, during this conflict. So pick it up. And the last for this category is Thick Boy, Under the Loving Care of the Fatherly Leader, North Korea and the Kim Dynasty by Bradley K. Martin. Oh, is that in focus? I hope so. This is a very thorough read. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if this is for the common person. I think you have to really be interested in North Korea to read this, because it's also a little deceiving because there's also a huge notes and like appendix section, but it is over 700 pages, and that's how many notes are on the pages. And it is a bit dated now. Copyright was originally 2004, but Oh, this was like the most detailed, most thorough. If you're really wanting to learn about Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il a little bit, this is the read. It covers so much. It covers the propaganda, and then in the middle it's got some pictures of just the Kim dynasty and just so cool, so interesting. But it is a chunker, so this isn't a a casual read. It is definitely a commitment one, but if you're ready for it, this is a good one. Then the last two are actually novels or a novel and a short story collection, so they're fictional. I struggle with reading fiction that's related to a real and historical topic that I especially know a lot about, because I'm just like, why wouldn't I just read the not like the real shit? The real shit's cool enough. Why are we fictionalizing? But I will say I really like these two, and I'll explain why. So first we have Jia, a novel in North Korea by Jin Kim. And what kind of got my buy-in is that in the introduction, it's revealed that this woman found out some information from a real North Korean lady. So it's not her personal story, and in order to protect that lady, and that she doesn't exactly have, you know, the right, she didn't get permission to tell her story, she made it fictional and probably fleshed out some things and whatever, and I'm like, fair enough. That's a good reason for something to be fictional, but it still has that nugget of truth. It has some realism in there that truly grounds it, and I thought it was really good. It was a really interesting perspective. Again, you have someone who's escaping via China in this case, and you have some of the repercussions and struggle with that. I don't think I mentioned, but with North Korea, there's a couple of different routes that people use for escape. And depending on who's like brokering the deal or helping them escape, or if they're doing it themselves or where they go through, there's some trickiness there. And the thing with China is that there's a part where they can cross where there's some Korean Chinese on the other side, but there's no guarantee that they're not going to report the defectors, and they could get in trouble with the Chinese government, and there's a whole rigmarole. But anyway, so this is a cool story. She actually grows up in a mountain gulag. And so this is representative of one of the like work camps that exist in North Korea that we don't know a ton about, but we have the like overhead footage of them. We know they exist, and we've heard things from different defectors and refugees from North Korea. It's interesting because she actually makes her way to an orphanage in Pyongyang and goes to a dance school. So you get that interesting juxtaposition of her childhood and background. And it was a good read. I liked it. And again, like, I hadn't read anything similar to this, and I've read at least maybe 30 books on North Korea. And last but not least, we have The Accusation, Forbidden Stories from Inside North Korea by Bundy. And this cover, just pretty cool cover, stands out. Minus the sticker I still need to get rid of, but you know. And this is a short story collection. Supposedly it's written by a North Korean who's still living in North Korea. I don't know about that. I'm not sure, but the short stories are good. They're very poignant and sad and telling. I think you should read something else before you read this, because there are certain nuggets that are more emotionally resonant if you have an understanding of what the North Korean people are going through and the different things, a part of their culture and their situation under the dictatorship, that you might not get, or it might not hit as hard if you haven't got that background understanding. But I thought it was really good and touching, as well as the fact that there are some stories that are just like really pointing the finger at North Korean government and dictatorship. It was such strong storytelling. I just really admired the amount of like craft that was put into this. So here we have it. Those are the books in my North Korean book collection and or recommendations for y'all. I'd love to know down below if any of these piqued your interest, if you'll be picking them up anytime soon. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye!